You know, sometimes it's the little things that can make life easier, like knowing you can have food delivered if you don't feel like cooking, or when you're desperate for a screwdriver and you realize, hey, your Swiss Army knife has one right there ready to go. The other day, I was getting ready to shoot a video, and I realized I had a bunch of little things in my studio that just make life easier. They're not big, expensive items, but they make a huge difference. Basically, thank God I bought that kind of things. And I wanted to share them with you because, well, I mean, they're affordable and they can make your life easier too. So earlier this year, I was at the annual NAMM trade show. It's a music trade show, and I stopped by the Mackie booth. And my contact over there took me in the back room to show me a new product that hadn't been released yet. It was all very hush-hush and very secret and very cool, but as he was describing all the features, I couldn't help but notice something else sitting right next to it. And I'm like, okay, yeah, all this secret stuff is cool, but tell me about this boom arm. When I started my channel, I would occasionally use a cheap boom arm like this, and it's got exposed springs, and it looks really industrial, and I don't mean in a good way. And the problem is that when you move it, you can hear the springs creak. What good is a boom arm if you can't move it around while you're recording? One of my family members bought me a new boom arm for Christmas, and it looked really good, really sleek and modern. In fact, I got a number of comments on my videos from viewers asking what it was, where they could buy it, but I would always refuse to tell people because it kind of sucked. It looked good, but it just had so many problems. For example, the cable clips were always loose and the mic cable would come out at the worst possible times, like when I was filming. So I replaced it with a Mackie DB-200 boom arm, and that's what you see here. And that turned out to be a real winner. It looks great, it's easy to adjust, and the cable management system is way better than the other boom arms I've tried, and it holds the cable securely. It's also pretty quiet when you move it, and it can hold some pretty heavy loads. Also, it sells for about $100, which is really reasonable. Now, Mackie did send it to me for free, but I would have happily paid for it, although I guess I shouldn't be saying that on camera. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you may remember a microphone I reviewed a while back. It's really cool. It's called the Tula Mic, and it's interesting because it sounds good, it's really portable, and you can record internally to it as well. And one of the features it has is noise reduction. Now, I've reviewed some wireless mics recently that had pretty bad noise reduction built in, but the Tula's mic noise reduction sounded pretty good. Now, it turns out they had licensed the software, which is called brusfri, from a Swedish company called Klevgrand. I think I'm saying that right. And they also sell it as a plugin for audio and video software. So I reached out to Klevgrand and said, hey, I just reviewed the Tula mic and your noise reduction software sounds pretty good. Can I review it on my YouTube channel? And they said, sure. And then I never reviewed it. Why? Well, I mean, it does a good job, so that's not the issue. The problem was the software is so simple to use and so single purpose that I had trouble coming up with an idea for a review video. Any review would be like 3 minutes long or something, and I just couldn't wrap my head around it, so I kept the review on the back burner. The good news, though, is that I finally get to tell you about it. Now, here's how it works. brusfri, that is really hard to say. brusfri works as an audio plugin and comes in VST, audio unit, and AAX formats. You can tell I don't use AAX format because I can't even say it. You can use it on Mac and Windows, and it works with a variety of software. I've used it in Apple Logic, I've used it in DaVinci Resolve, but it's gonna work in just about any audio or video editing platform that allows plugins. So here's how it works. Basically, you find a piece of audio that has just the noise you want to remove, like something that would be like a part of a clip that you would consider silent, but it's got a little noise in it. And you use that to train brusfri on your noise, and you just hold down a button while it's playing. I sometimes get fan noise from my lights creeping into my audio. Actually, I can hear some fan noise coming from my laptop right now too. So I might have to use brusfri on the tail end of this. But it does a great job of removing that kind of noise, and it can remove just about any quiet, continuous noise that might find its way into your audio. Now, it's not a miracle worker. It's not going to remove like crazy sounds that are louder than the sound you want to keep, for example. And it's also less good at removing intermittent sounds, like, for example, crickets. It does not remove crickets. I sometimes get crickets sneaking into my studio during the summer, and it's a nightmare. You know what does remove crickets? Cricket traps. So there's this giant button in the middle of the app that you just click and hold to sample your noise. And you also get some really simple controls that you can help to dial in your noise reduction. You can adjust the frequency response of the processed audio as well as the gain. You can also adjust how much noise reduction is going on by tweaking the height of this line right here. And ClevGrant also includes controls for the attack and release portions of the noise reduction. To be honest though, I rarely use any of those other controls because if I have to start fussing with some of those controls, I'm probably better off killing the noise in the real world, like with cricket traps. Since I film a lot of product reviews aimed at content creators, I have to shoot a lot of B-roll of the products themselves. And to make B-roll interesting, some sort of movement is usually necessary. Either you move the product or you move the camera, but something needs to move. Otherwise, you could just take a photo and use that. So a while back, I bought a motorized slider so that I could get some movement in my B-roll shots. But you know what? Sliders are a giant pain to set up and use. And the one I bought was a very inexpensive one. Okay, it was a cheap one. So the footage I got was kind of bumpy in places, and that's not exactly what you want from a slider. I found that it also took a long time to actually get the shots. I mean, sliders are slow moving, and I would spend several hours just to get a handful of usable B-roll clips. But then I discovered this rotating camera platform thingy. It's made by Glide Gear, and it's called the Revo 50. You put the product on the platform, and then the camera just rotates around it. It's sort of the reverse of a photo turntable, which would have you spinning the product. With this device, the lighting doesn't change on the product, but the camera angle does. Now, it's not motorized, but it is pretty easy to get smooth movement by hand. Just make sure you're on a flat surface that isn't tilted, otherwise the unit wants to swing one direction more easily than the other. So it's nice, you can adjust the distance of the camera to the product, and there's a system of weights to counterbalance your camera so it doesn't tip over. You can put it on a desk, or you can even mount the whole thing on a C-stand if you wanted, but I haven't tried that. And there's also a black rectangular backdrop that you can put behind your product, and which turns with the camera, so it's always perfectly framed, and you always have like a black background. I really haven't used that much though. I just use my studio wall as the background instead. Now I gotta be honest, this thing does take a little while to set up, and it doesn't come with a case. There's a bunch of weights and metal poles that are kind of hard to put back into the box properly, so that's an area that could use some improvement. However, it is still way easier to set up than a slider. Does it give the same results as a slider? No, but it gives me movement in my B-roll shots, and it takes up far less time than a slider would. And I still have my slider, but to be honest, I haven't used it even once since I got the Revo 50. Now, the Revo 50 goes for about $200. If you shoot product photography or product videography, this is definitely something to look into. So speaking of shooting B-roll, I find that when I'm shooting B-roll of review products, I often have to shoot some really tiny parts of the product. Like, for example, on a microphone, I want to get shots of the switches up close. And a standard camera lens can't focus close enough to really get the detail I'm looking for. Now, there are basically 3 different ways you can photograph or video something small or up close. And the first is to buy a dedicated macro lens. However, a dedicated macro lens is not super practical for many people, and the reason is they tend to be really expensive. Unless you're using a lens like this regularly and professionally, it might not be the best choice. Now, while I do a lot of close-up work, I can't justify spending hundreds of dollars on a lens I don't use that often. Now, another option is to get a set of macro tubes that go between your lens and your camera. And by pushing the lens out away from your camera with these tubes, you can focus in much closer on small objects. Some of these tubes even keep the electrical connections between your camera and the lens, so you can still use autofocus and aperture. There are 2 reasons, though, I don't use macro tubes. The first is that they reduce the amount of light getting to your camera's sensor, sometimes by quite a lot. You might find you have to bump up your ISO, and then you might have to worry about noise. But the real reason I don't use macro tubes is that when I'm shooting B-roll, I'm often going back and forth between close-up and normal shots, and it would be really inconvenient to keep removing my lens and installing or removing the macro tube each time. Also, each time I do that, I risk getting dust on my sensor. And I hate getting dust on my sensor and not knowing it, and then you find out later you've got this big blotch on your face or in the sky. So instead, I go with simple and cheap macro filters, which are really just diopter lenses you put on the front of your main lens, and they allow you to get closer to your subject, and you can stack them for even more magnification. And I might get a few lens aberrations when I'm using these macro filters, you know, some little fuzziness on the edges or some just weirdness. But the fact that I can swap them out quickly is way more important. Now, any of those 3 solutions would work, but I went with macro filters. I bought some cheap filters from a company called X-SweetDream, and they do the job just fine. Also, they were under $20. All right, and now for the gadget that has really changed my video production life, like massively. Actually, it's 2 gadgets that work together, and I'm also a little hesitant to tell you about this one, and I'll explain why in a moment. Several YouTubers I follow have talked about how they use teleprompters and that they are huge time savers. One YouTuber claimed that he could record the talking part of his video in as little as 20 minutes. Now, as a content creator, this seemed like a bit of a fantasy. It used to take me maybe 2 hours to record the talking portion of a 10-minute video. But after talking directly with one of these YouTubers about teleprompters, I decided I'm gonna take the plunge. And my first results were really, really, really bad. It turned out that getting the timing right is tough. See, most teleprompters use a phone or a tablet to display the script, so you need an app to reflect the script off the teleprompter glass. And many teleprompters come with a remote control that allows you to stop and start the script. You can also set the speed of the scrolling and move up and down if you need to repeat something, which is fine in theory, but I found that getting the speed right of the script as it's scrolling by is really a challenge. If it was too fast, I couldn't keep up and then I had to pause. And too slow, and I'm sitting around waiting for the next words. And all of this was a little stressful because I was focused on keeping up with the scrolling. And as a result, I sounded really flat and stilted on camera, which is not good. The good news is that working with a teleprompter does get easier with practice. And I know some people have been using teleprompters for years, but I wasn't having any luck, and I was getting really frustrated. What good is speeding up your video if the end result is something no one wants to watch, right? Then I heard about this teleprompter software called PromptSmart Pro, and I mean, it's a little pricey for an app. It's about $30, and then, of course, there are additional features that are subscription-based, which means, of course, that I don't have them because I don't like subscriptions. But here's the thing, PromptSmart Pro doesn't rely on scrolling at a set speed. Instead, it uses voice recognition to understand where you are in the script and scrolls only when you've gotten to that section. You can speed up or slow down your delivery and the software will just keep up. You can even go off script, which is huge. You can even just pause. So that way if a joke comes to mind or you just want to ad-lib something, you can just go right ahead. And the app will just sit and wait for you to get back to the script. So the combination of a teleprompter and this app has really been a game changer for my video production. I mean, there is definitely a learning curve and it does take some practice to be able to read a script and sound convincing. And also, I gotta say, while I save time in shooting, I do spend more time on the script. So I have to make sure it really sounds like me. Otherwise, it's gonna still sound a little stiff. So I probably spend twice as long writing my script. But there's also an added secret bonus, I guess. It's not secret, I'm gonna tell you about it. But anyway, there's an added bonus when I use a teleprompter. My editing actually gets faster. And I don't have to try to patch something together in the edit from on-camera ramblings where I can't, keep my thoughts together. And with a teleprompter, the best take is usually the last take. And so putting a rough edit together, it can really be put together in literally minutes. So why was I reluctant to tell you about a teleprompter? Well, I was a little worried that you'd watch this last section and be constantly thinking, is he using a teleprompter? Which, I guess that makes me want to ask you, is there something wrong with using a teleprompter? Is it fake somehow? I'm speaking my own words and my own ideas, so what do you think? Let me know in the comments if you would ever consider using a teleprompter for your video production. And by the way, I'm using the ILOKNZI. I'm not actually sure how to pronounce it, but it's their i2 12-inch teleprompter. And it's designed so that you can use a tablet or an iPad. I use my iPad on it. And it comes with a case, and you can take it apart and store it. But, I'm too lazy. I just keep it set up and throw it in the closet between shoots because I'm using it pretty regularly. And so this teleprompter goes for about $120 or so. It's a pretty simple, basic teleprompter, but it gets the job done. Now, before I tell you about a bonus 7th secret weapon I use in my studio, I just wanted to mention, if you want any more info or want to check current prices on any of these things, please use the affiliate links I put in the video notes. So that bonus 7th thing that could make your life a whole lot easier,
Got a two-tone